Donald Trump wants out of the Iran war, but the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important shipping route, is still under Iranian control. 32 days of bombing. Gas just crossed $4 a gallon for the first time since 2022. And the Strait of Hormuz is now operating as an Iranian toll road, with Iran charging $2 million per ship to pass through. The war was sold as a 4 to 6 week operation. That window is closing, and every exit Trump can see leads to a different version of the same defeat. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly why Trump is acting desperate to exit the war he started, and what happens when the strategic petroleum reserves run dry in the next 2 weeks. Now here is what we know. On the 30th of March, the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump told his own aides he is willing to end the war even if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. He assessed that forcing it open militarily would push the conflict well beyond his own deadline. The next day, his press secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed it from the podium. She listed the war's core objectives as destroying Iran's navy, dismantling its missile and drone infrastructure, weakening its proxies, and preventing nuclear capability. Reopening the strait was not on that list. The waterway that is choking the global economy was quietly removed from the victory checklist. That is a rewrite of the war's justification, and it happened on live television. Then it got worse. On the 31st of March, Trump told reporters the war would wrap up in 2 to 3 weeks. He said the United States could leave within 2 to 3 weeks, because he believes the main military objectives can be completed without a wider, longer war. Hours later, he posted on Truth Social, telling NATO allies to build up some delayed courage, go to the strait, and just take it. He called France very unhelpful. He told the world the United States will not be there to help you anymore. Secretary of State Marco Rubio tried to soften it, insisting the strait would reopen one way or another. But the message was clear. The United States started this war. Iran responded by locking down the most important energy corridor on Earth. And now America is telling the rest of the world to go fix it themselves. We need to talk about what Iran actually built while the White House was issuing threats, because this is the part most people are missing. Before we continue, thanks a lot for tuning in. And as always, please make sure to subscribe and like the video so I can keep bringing you these updates. Now, most people assume Iran simply blocked the Strait of Hormuz the way it has threatened to do for decades. A crude shutdown, ships stopped, waterway sealed. In reality, Tehran did something far more calculated and far more dangerous. It did not just close the strait. It converted it into a sovereign checkpoint with a two-tier geopolitical access system, and it is now drafting permanent legislation to keep it that way. Before the war began on the 28th of February, roughly 100 to 110 vessels passed through Hormuz every single day. 20 million barrels of crude, 1/5 of all seaborne oil on the planet. Since Operation Epic Fury launched, that number has collapsed by 95%. Lloyd's List. Intelligence recorded just 142 total transits between the 1st and the 25th of March. In the same period last year, 2025, that number was 2,652. 1 month of wartime traffic barely equals a single peacetime day. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps established what the shipping industry now calls the Tehran toll booth. Any vessel wanting passage has to submit its full cargo manifest, complete crew list, ownership records, and destination port to IRGC-approved intermediaries. If the IRGC clears the ship, it receives a coded authorization. An IRGC patrol boat then escorts the vessel through a rerouted channel, not the standard 2-lane traffic separation scheme running through the middle of the strait, but a narrow corridor north of Larak Island, threading between 2 Iranian islands and running along the Iranian coast. Every ship that uses this route passes through waters Tehran claims as sovereign. That is not an accident. That is the architecture of permanent control. The access rules are split along geopolitical lines. Vessels flagged to China, and Russia, India, Iraq, and Pakistan transit for free. Ships tied to the United States, Israel, or their allies either pay roughly $2 million per crossing settled in Chinese yuan, or they do not pass at all. At least 2 vessels have already paid. Iran's parliament is actively drafting a bill to codify this arrangement into law, not as a wartime emergency measure, as a permanent expression of sovereignty. Lawmaker Mohammadreza Rezaei Kouchi told Iranian state media that parliament is pursuing a plan to formally establish Iranian control and oversight over the strait while creating a revenue stream through transit fees. And here is what makes this devastating for Washington. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who succeeded his father after Ali Khamenei was killed early in the war, who said in his first publicly reported remarks that the leverage of Hormuz should continue to be used. Tehran has also added a demand to its list of conditions for ending the war that was never on the table before: recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. At the projected toll rate and normal traffic volume, that toll system would generate upwards of $600 million per month from oil tankers alone. Include LNG cargoes and the figure exceeds 800 million. Egypt collects roughly 7 to 800 million monthly from the Suez Canal. Iran is building itself a Suez-level revenue machine from a waterway that under international law belongs to no single nation. Stay with me, because the contradiction between what Trump is saying and what the Pentagon is doing is the most revealing fault line of this entire conflict. While Trump talks about leaving, the Pentagon is still building combat power in the region. Reuters and AP have reported additional Marine expeditionary forces moving toward the Middle East, roughly 2,500 paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division deploying into theater, and a third U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, being sent to support the buildup. That is not the profile of a clean exit. It is the profile of an administration keeping escalation options alive, including a possible move on Karg Island. 2 carrier strike groups have already rotated through, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald Ford, though the Ford pulled out to split. Croatia on the 28th of March, after an onboard fire the Pentagon called non-combat related. Iran-affiliated media immediately claimed a successful strike. CENTCOM denied it. Either way, the Ford is out of the fight. All told, nearly 7,000 additional combat troops are flowing into the Gulf. That is not a drawdown. That is a buildup. And every military analyst watching knows the most discussed option right now is a seizure of Karg Island. Karg sits about 15 miles off Iran's southern coast. It processes approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. Trump told the Financial Times he could take the island. The troop packages make sense for exactly this kind of operation. Marines for amphibious assault, airborne for rapid insertion into contested terrain, special operators for securing nuclear materials identified by U.S. intelligence as a priority recovery target. Iran has fired hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of drones since the war began, and Reuters has reported that roughly 1/3 of Iran's missile arsenal is confirmed destroyed. Analysts note this leaves significant remaining capacity. Separately, U.S. and Gulf facilities have sustained some damage during the conflict. Our CNN reported that Iran is fortifying Karg Island with additional troops, layered air defenses, and physical traps. Iran's parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bagher Khalibaf warned publicly that if any regional state supports a landing operation, all of its vital infrastructure will be targeted with relentless, unceasing attacks. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis called the amphibious option extremely dangerous. The Royal United Services Institute in London assessed it would not be bloodless, and the Foundation for Defense of Democracies warned that holding Karg under continuous ballistic missile fire from the Iranian mainland just 15 miles away would require a massive defensive footprint that cannot be rapidly assembled. That is not a commando raid. That is an open-ended occupation. And Trump has spent his entire political career promising that the forever wars are over. Now here's the dimension that is accelerating Trump's desperation faster than any military variable: the economic wreckage. U.S. gas prices hit a nationwide average of $4.02 on the 31st of March. That is a jump of more than $1 from the pre-war price of $2.97, a 35% spike in 32 days. Diesel has been even more brutal, surging 45% to $5.45 per gallon. Diesel powers every truck, every tractor, every freight train, every construction site in the country. That cost is not at the pump yet. It is in the pipeline. It will land on grocery shelves, shipping invoices, and electricity bills over the next 60 to 90 days. Brent crude settled around $118 per barrel for May delivery. That is a 60% increase since the war began. Goldman Sachs and others have warned that sustained closure of Hormuz could push crude past $150 or even $200 per barrel, a level the world has never experienced. The IEA has described the disruption as unprecedented in scale, and governments responded with a record-coordinated release of 400 million barrels from strategic reserves. That bought time, not a solution. The damage now stretches far beyond the pump. Qatar Energy has declared force majeure on some LNG contracts. The Philippines has declared a national energy emergency. Helium supplies have been disrupted, and markets are increasingly pricing in slower growth, stickier inflation, and fewer near-term rate cuts. Trump's political position has weakened sharply. Reuters/Ipsos found his overall approval at 36%, only 29% approved of his handling of the economy, and just 35% supported the strikes on Iran, while about 60% opposed them. Roughly 2/3 of Americans said the United States should end the war quickly, even if it does not achieve all of its objectives. House Armed Services Chairman Mike Rogers told reporters there is frustration on both sides of the aisle after classified Pentagon briefings that left lawmakers with more questions than answers about troop plans, endgame, and cost. Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick said he is getting information from press reports, not from the administration. All 435 House seats and 35 Senate seats go to voters in November. And every single day the pump price stays above $4, the Republican position weakens. So where does this end? Trump has 3 roads, and none of them lead somewhere clean. He can declare victory and withdraw with Hormuz still under Iranian control. Rubio is already building that narrative. Netanyahu told Newsmax the war has passed the halfway mark in terms of missions. The language is being shaped to claim success. But if the strait stays closed, the toll regime hardens, gas stays expensive, and critics will frame the entire campaign as the most expensive strategic failure since Vietnam. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, publicly said on Fox News that the United States should win this thing and clean up the straits. He can hand the problem to allies. London and Paris are reportedly assembling a coalition of up to 35 nations to secure the strait after the fighting stops, with frigates, escorts, and air defense. China and Pakistan have proposed their own 5-point peace plan. But this path exposes the fact that America launched a war and then asked the rest of the world to finish it. Or he can escalate, seize Karg, storm the Iranian littoral, force the strait open with Marines and airborne infantry under fire. The forces are in position. The Boxer arrives in 2 weeks, giving the U.S. its maximum ground capability. But the Pentagon estimates a Hormuz reopening operation alone would take 4 to 6 additional weeks, pushing the war deep into May. U.S. casualties would rise. The political fallout would be volcanic. And Trump would own a ground war in Iran. Or the exact scenario he built his political brand on opposing. Tomorrow night, April the 2nd, Trump addresses the nation on Iran. The White House rescheduled a trip to China for mid-May, which many are reading as a quiet deadline for ending the conflict. The strategic petroleum reserves are running dry. The Boxer strike group is closing in. The toll regime is hardening into law. The United States sank most of Iran's navy. It cratered airfields, missile factories, and nuclear facilities across the country. $11.3 billion spent in 6 days. Over 8,000 targets struck, 92% of Iran's major warships eliminated. And after all of that, Iran still controls the one thing that matters. The narrow corridor of water between its coastline and Oman, through which 1/5 of the world's energy supply is supposed to flow. The war was sold as strength. The exit is being packaged as flexibility. But the strait tells the only story that markets, allies, and voters will remember. Who holds Hormuz holds the leverage. And right now, that is not the United States. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate your support. Join the discussion in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think Trump can find an exit that looks like a victory? Do you think the war has spiraled completely out of control? Let me know. And please subscribe and like the video if you want to stay updated. And click the video on the screen to see another. I will see you soon.